I'd take my stuff, hop on a small boat, head to that same island, light a fire, fish, drink coffee, and listen to my small radio until sunrise, when I'd head back home and eat the fish I caught. To me, that was the ultimate relaxation. What do you think your fate would be if one of your favorite hobbies was fishing? Weird, right? Like, what if your hobby was fishing on an island, but only after midnight? Something you probably wouldn't guess happened to this Saudi man after he went to that island to practice his strange hobby. Alone in the dark, far away from people, with a story I guarantee you've never heard before. So don't forget to like, my friend. Let's get started with today's episode. This story is from Majed, from the city of Al-Baha, Saudi Arabia. Majed says, I'm currently 27 years old and live alone in a simple house after the death of my parents. I have 6 siblings, all living in the same city but in separate houses. I work at a government office and make a living from that. Thank God, everything is comfortable, but there are a few things I consider essential in my life. First of all, I live alone, independent in my house. I don't like mixing with people, I don't like traveling, and most importantly, what's relevant to this story is that I've been passionate about fishing since I was 8 years old. My father used to take me with him to the sea or any large pond, and we'd sit there fishing, having fun, and getting away from it all. It's just a hobby I love and inherited from my dad. I probably should have stopped it because it's the reason my father passed away. May he rest in peace. Before I begin my story with you, let me tell you about my father's death because it ties into the story. One hot summer day, my dad planned to go fishing and refused to let me join him that day, maybe because of the heat. He went alone to the village of Sam al-Zawahir, near the sea, and picked a spot about 1,500 meters from the Coast Guard station. It was the same place he used to take me all the time, a small island surrounded by deep waters full of fish, far from people, requiring a small boat to get to. That day, he went there, but time passed, and my father didn't return. What I forgot to mention is that when we go fishing, we stay for very long hours. We might leave in the morning and return the next day, so it was normal to spend the night on that island. But my father stayed out for nearly 2 days without coming back. My brother started to worry, and before we even began looking for him to check if he was okay, a police patrol came and informed us that the Coast Guard had found my father drowned with the boat. The waves had thrown him onto the shore, where they found him, identified him, and informed us. But how did he drown? What happened? Nobody knows. It could have been a natural accident, but we have no details. At the time, I was curious to understand. How did the boat sink? And what brought him to the shore? I started going to that same island every day, sitting there from sunset to sunrise. I was both away from people and fishing, which was what I enjoyed most and gave me peace of mind. Plus, I thought I might find the reason that could explain how my father drowned. It didn't matter if the reason was natural, logical, or even illogical. All that mattered to me was understanding why, and to be honest, I didn't even know why I was thinking this way. Even though I was young back then, nobody could stop me from doing this. My brothers left me to do my thing, and days, weeks, and months passed. This simple hobby turned into a routine, something I couldn't give up every 3 days. I'd take my stuff, hop on a small boat, head to that same island, light a fire, fish, drink coffee, and listen to my small radio until sunrise, when I'd head back home and eat the fish I caught. To me, that was the ultimate relaxation. And as for fishing at night, I wasn't scared at all because I'd gotten used to it from a young age. After my mother passed, my brothers bought their own houses and moved out, while I stayed living alone in the family home, happy and content. And that's when the story begins. In 2016, I took my gear and headed to the village. I got on the boat and went to the island, but I thought I'd change my fishing spot this time. I decided to sit in a different area than the one I was used to. So I walked to another part of the island, and that's when I found some stuff. A small chair used by fishermen, a fishing rod, and some basic tools. But they were old, worn out, and looked like they'd been there for a long time. The spot itself faced another island, a green one with trees, plants, and large rocks in the middle of the water. It was strange because, all this time, I'd never gone near that area even though it was on the same island, nor had I ever noticed those things before. I put the items down, lit the fire as usual, and sat there enjoying my time. I cast the fishing line into the sea and turned on the radio. And I just waited. Time passed, and it became sunset. Now, listen to what happened when night began. As darkness started covering the place, I noticed something on the island across from me, right on the edge of it. Among the plants, it looked like people were walking and then stepped into the water. I was torn between thinking I was seeing something real or just imagining things. From a distance, it looked like a woman with 2 children, and with the dim moonlight, I thought maybe I was imagining things. I continued fishing and sipping my coffee, but just a few minutes later, I turned to my left, and there I saw a woman wearing black clothes. She emerged from the water, walking, followed by a boy who couldn't have been more than 10 years old. Behind the boy, a little girl also appeared, probably the same age as him, walking one after the other quietly and slowly. There's no way they were normal people, if they were even human at all. The constant shivers running down my spine were enough to make me feel that something was seriously off. Because honestly, I wasn't imagining things. What I was seeing was real. I stood up, staring, trying to prove to myself that what I was seeing was actually happening. The shivers got worse to the point where I felt the blood rushing to my head. In those few seconds, I heard myself saying, "I need to get out of here," and I knew I had to head to the boat as fast as I could and escape. Why run away? I didn't even know, but that's what my mind was screaming at me to do. I quietly dropped the fishing rod on the ground, left everything where it was, and sprinted toward the boat. And that's when the disaster struck. I saw the boat shaking violently from side to side, with water starting to pour into it. It was done for. Officially, the boat was sinking. After all, it was just a small boat, and even the tiniest wave could sink it. And sure enough, after a few moments of shaking, it sank right next to the island. But there weren't any waves, and the surrounding water wasn't rough, which means something under the water was causing the boat to sink. At that moment, I remembered my father's last fishing trip when they found him drowned on the shore. That strange memory didn't make sense to me at the time, but it gave me the eerie feeling that I might end up with the same fate. I saw people walking out of the water. I saw my boat shaking and sinking right in front of me. None of it made any sense. Things on that island were not normal. They were supernatural. So, based on what I saw, I had no choice but to jump in the water and swim to the shore to save myself from the unknown. It was about 150 meters, but that distance felt like the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. It felt like I was carrying a mountain on my back as I swam for some reason. I struggled to stay afloat, even though I was a skilled swimmer and had crossed this same area many times before. But on that day, everything was different. After a long struggle, I finally reached the shore, completely out of breath and exhausted. I started running as fast as I could. My only goal was to get far away, and when I looked back toward the island, I saw 4 figures walking in a straight line. I guessed from the distance and the darkness that they were the same people who came out of the water earlier, but I had only seen 3, a woman, a boy, and a girl. Where did the 4th person come from? I had no idea. I just kept running, got to my car, and drove home. I started thinking about everything that happened. Was it something normal that I just interpreted as strange? Even if what happened was something strange, I was able to survive it by the grace of God. I had thousands of questions running through my mind, and I didn't have an answer to any of them to explain or clarify what had happened. At the very least, I wanted to find some sort of explanation, maybe a scientific one. Anyway, I got home, took a shower, prayed, and slept out of sheer exhaustion. I told myself I'd go back in the morning to retrieve the sunken boat and my belongings. If there was a logical reason for what happened, I'd figure it out. I ended up sleeping deeply, deeper than I've ever slept in my life. While I was asleep, I dreamt about the exact same events you've heard, from the moment I set foot on the island to the moment I fled. But in the dream, things became even more terrifying as they revealed the full truth. I saw 4 people walking into the water, one behind the other. An older woman, most likely the mother, followed by a boy and a girl. Behind them was an older man, who I guessed was the father. I figured he was the father since it seemed like a family, and I wasn't too concerned about them because they were far away. But then, I saw the father standing directly behind me, whispering in my ear, telling me, "Run, escape, save your life," repeating this over and over while I kept focusing on the mother and her kids walking out of the water, heading forward. The moment I saw them emerge, the father started speaking, and I began to hear his words. And just like in real life, I ran towards my boat. But next to the boat, I saw many hands reaching out of the water, grabbing it as if they were trying to sink it. And indeed, the boat sank. Everything I saw in reality repeated itself in the dream, exactly the same way, but with extra details that I couldn't see in real life. And that wasn't even the strangest part of the dream. When I jumped into the water to escape, I saw myself swimming, but there were countless hands grabbing onto my body, trying to pull me down. At the same time, the strange father who I saw entering the water with his family appeared again behind me, telling me to escape. I saw him again, but this time, it seemed like he was pulling me up so that I wouldn't drown until I reached the shore. The hands were still trying to drag me back into the sea, while the strange father kept pulling me towards the land. The hands coming out of the water were so long that they were all I could see, just long, extended hands reaching out from the sea, grabbing hold of me. And the strange father was literally pulling me forward, helping me, saving me. I saw myself caught between them, utterly exhausted, trying to move and run. At a certain point, the hands finally let go of me and retreated into the sea. And then, the strange father disappeared. I saw all of this in vivid detail, but it was inside the dream. And even then, the dream didn't end there. I saw myself back in my house, swimming, and when the water touched my body, the marks left by the hands started to fade. The hands that had grabbed me in the sea had left actual marks on my body. But the body I saw in the dream wasn't my real body. God knows if there's any connection between the two, the body in the dream and the body in reality. The important thing is, I saw myself. I went to bed, and I actually saw myself lying down to sleep, even though I was still inside the dream. At that moment, everything started turning to darkness. Now, my friend, listen to this detail that gave me chills. You know that kind of shiver you get for no reason. It's bad manners. But this time, there was a reason for it. Majed says that when everything turned dark, it felt like I was still awake, just waiting for the dream to end. I looked around, waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. Then I realized it wasn't actually darkness, but rather a place of deep blackness. There were no details around me, just pure blackness. The thing that made me sure I was in a place, not just darkness, was that I could see myself clearly. I could see my clothes, my hands moving. Everything was sharp and clear. When I realized this, fear crept in, even though I was still in my dream. The place was so quiet that I could hear my heartbeat clearly. Then, out of nowhere, I saw the same father and his family walking in a straight line in that dark, black place. They were coming toward me. Out of fear, I didn't move or even breathe. The mother, son, and daughter passed by me at a short distance, with the father following closely behind them. That's when the father looked directly at me and said, "Majed, peace and safety to you." He stopped in his tracks while I stood there in shock, my eyes wide open, trying to grasp whether this was a dream or something else entirely. Then, I heard the father say, "You entered a place that, had it not been for the mercy of God Almighty, you wouldn't have come out of, nor would you have returned again." After that, he calmly walked away, continuing on his path until he faded from sight. I kept watching him as he moved farther and farther away, turning into a tiny dot and then vanishing completely. According to the laws of perspective, he simply disappeared from view. If I had binoculars, maybe I could have seen him again as he moved off into the distance. That's just to explain what I saw in the dream. After that, I finally woke up from the dream. The strange thing was that when I woke up, it was as if I had just opened my eyes, and there was no sign that I had been dreaming. I lay there thinking about who that man was and what had just happened. Suddenly, I heard the front door of the house being thrown open, and two of my brothers came rushing in, terrified, screaming my name. I ran to them quickly to see what was going on. One of them hugged me, while the other dropped to the floor, clearly shaken with fear. I asked them what had happened. They told me that the Coast Guard had found my boat sunken near the shore, in the exact same spot where our father, may God rest his soul, had drowned. We got a call from the police, and they thought you had drowned too. Our other brothers went to the boat, but we didn't find you, so we rushed home, hoping you were here. Thank God you're safe, but your boat is sunk over there. To sum it up, my friend, what happened to Majed was truly strange. He saw a family walking in and out of the water, both in real life and in his dream. The father of that family helped him. And then, there was the fact that the Coast Guard found his boat near the shore, even though it had sunk by the island, about 150 meters away. It's nearly impossible for the boat to have floated all the way to the shore without the waves pushing it. Plus, there's the eerie family that walked in and out of the water, and the hands he saw in the dream that tried to drown him. Only God knows if those hands were the ones that sank the boat. None of this was normal. But Majed still doesn't fully understand what happened or have a clear explanation. He says he thought about it, was shocked and scared, but what he ended up doing was changing the island where he goes fishing. He also stopped fishing at night. To this day, he still doesn't know what exactly happened. If anyone has an explanation for this event, write it in the comments. Maybe it wasn't the scariest thing, but it was definitely strange, and he swears that everything he told you is 100% true, down to the last detail.